Hello, I'm back. Isn't that like a reference to a scary movie? I will say I am not about the spirit of fear, so I don't watch horror movies anymore. I know I feel like everyone goes through the phase of liking scary movies at some point, but I'm not about that anymore. I think that was The Shining where he says that. But without being too funny and weird, I just wanted to say I am back and I'm so excited to get the new season of the Thought Vault relaunched and back in your ears. I took a longer than anticipated hiatus, or back better than ever maybe. I don't know, but we're excited. I'm excited and I cannot wait to connect with all of you again. So let's dive into today's topic, and I'm going to ask you the question, are you living in the desert? Welcome to the Thought Vault, where we learn to unlock our minds to live with more purpose and bold intention. I'm your host, Emily Vermillion. Take a deep breath and let's get started. Welcome back, everybody. I am so excited to be here today and talking to you again. So we took a hiatus for a little bit, and quite frankly, it just lasted longer than I anticipated. I got further certified in my life coaching certifications. I love school. I'm like one of those freaky people who love to learn. So I got extra certified in different areas. I also had a child. So I am the proud mama to 3 babies now. And our little sweet shepherd is 9 months old now. So I needed that time. I needed that time to recalibrate, resituate my lifestyle, my priorities, and what God was really calling me to do. And so it took me a little bit to get back to this, but podcasting and this show in particular has been nothing but a absolute dream of mine. And it is something that I don't think I will ever put down fully. And so I'm excited to be back. And that's a little bit of why, quite frankly, it took me a little while to get back in the swing of things. I just needed that time. I needed that time with my family. I needed that time to connect more with God and follow some things and see them to the end. And I needed the time to do that because I love this podcast and I put a lot of energy into each and every single episode. So for me, if I wasn't going to be able to put my all into it, it needed to be on a break. So I hope you guys have had time to maybe listen to some of the older episodes. All of the content previously to this one, if you're new to the show, go back and check it out. It's evergreen content, as they like to say in the marketing world, which basically means it's not anything that's going to go out of style. So all of those previous episodes have a lot of great research and wisdom, God's wisdom behind it all. So check out any episodes that you haven't heard yet. And let's dive into today's topic. So I don't know if you have ever heard the phrase, it's not about the destination, but the journey. So I have kind of been in this season of wandering, I should say, and wandering, trying to figure out exactly where I'm headed, where God needs me to be, and where He needs me and what He needs me to prioritize in my life. And this is something that has come up repeatedly, not only with myself, but my coaching clients, with my friends, and the season of life that we're in. And I just kind of hear this subject a lot. And so I thought, what better topic to dive into on our first episode back after our break. And I wanted to talk to you guys about it. I mean, have you ever questioned God about the timing of things? Like, why hasn't this happened yet? Why haven't you answered me? Will I ever get to where I want to be? Why isn't this working? Why is this taking so long? Is there going to be an end in sight? And I've asked these questions myself of the Lord, and maybe you have too. And it can leave us very frustrated and very jaded about our circumstances. And so digging into the word, digging into conversations with my friends and those that I love, I wanted to dive into this topic a little bit more and see what God had to say about it, right? We've been conditioned in every arena of our life that there's like this clear directive path for things, from school to society expectations of different timelines and when a good time is to do certain things, and this lie of instant gratification. Am I right? Like, I love Amazon. I'm not going to deny it. And so we live in this technological world that has kind of warped our minds into believing that the genie in the bottle depicted in Aladdin, is now spelled Google. So we can get anything that we need pretty much instantaneously. The journey is not often given the equitable weight that it deserves in the storylines that we hear. We constantly are seeing people's end, but we're not seeing the entire story of what it took to get them there. It's kind of like the picture that I've heard before, and I love this metaphor. It's like a lot of times we only see the tip of the iceberg that's sticking out of the water. We're not seeing the huge mountain of ice that's underneath the surface that grew and got to the point where that just the tip of the iceberg is sticking out of the water. And so we see that in people's lives. We see their journey, but we only think it's like the little bit that they're sharing, right? Or what we can assume by just looking from the outside at their lives. And it hurts us to think that we don't have the same possibility for ourselves, or that God isn't working in our lives in the same way. I'm a perfectionist and I'm a chronic productivity chaser. I used to roll my eyes at that phrase, it's not the destination, it's the journey. Sorry, but isn't the destination the whole point? Like, that's how my mind has been framed. I want to get to the end. I'm a person who is very goal oriented, and I measure my success by achievements. And I'm not like boasting in that. I don't like that about myself. I'm always looking at the end. Like, that is the point to me. But what I have found is that is a lie. It's a lie straight from Satan. The journey is in fact the entire point. There's nothing to experience or enjoy if there's no way to get there. If it's kind of like that phrase, if we were all the same, there'd be nothing to talk about. What would there be to experience if everything was perfect? If we already lived in heaven, what would God be able to, how would he be able to grow us if everything was given to us, right? If we lived in perfection. And this has become more and more my anthem as time has proven to be the catalyst for so much angst in my life. And time after time, God has shown me that patience and the waiting is where I'm meant to be. So there must be significance in that, right? Because I feel like I've been in a season of waiting for the things that I feel God has called me to do, but haven't fully formed or haven't come to fruition fully. And when we look to God's word, there's story after story after story of the most faithful and prominent figures waiting. So many people in the Bible are waiting. One person I'd like to focus on today to really help us get an understanding of this is Moses. Most people know the story of Moses, and when asked, they can recite a storyline about his life, and usually it has about 6 main events. And what is told and used for analogies and sermons and speeches and talks and examples of faithfulness pinpoint to those exact little moments of divine intervention. But what's glossed over is all of the waiting that Moses endures. The first big event in Moses' life didn't happen until he was 40, when he murdered someone and had to flee Egypt. So he lived for 40 years. That's older than I am now. And I feel like I've lived so much. He lived longer than I've been alive so far. And what was going on during all that time, right? There isn't much shared about that time in his life. We know that it speaks to him being educated in all the ways of the Egyptians. We know that his mother taught him for about 12 years of his life and taught him about the Bible, taught him about God. But really, those are the only details of 40 years. So the context of all that time is a mystery to us on this side of the Bible and reading it. But did that mean that God wasn't there? that he wasn't prepping Moses for what was to be his story? No. The next point that a lot of people point to when it comes to Moses was when he was 80 years old. 80 years old, and he speaks to God through a burning bush. He was 80 when that happened, y'all. We think about the concise directive given directly by God's audible voice to Moses on what to do. Like, it's time for you to go back to Pharaoh, and this is what's going to happen, and this is what you're going to say to him. I mean, God gives him like exact, specific instructions on what to do to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. But y'all, he was literally in the desert for 40 years before that. We don't talk about that. We fail to talk about the fact that he was living in the desert, shepherding sheep for 40 years. 40 years. He was 80 years old when the plagues took place. I mean, what? When God uprooted his life and intervened, he was 80. So those 40 years in the desert do matter because they give context to the mental state of Moses when God did specifically say, boy, I'm calling you now. Like, it is time to get moving. You've got a huge job ahead of you, a huge mission in front of you. You got to go. But he was 80 when that took place. So it's said in Numbers chapter 12, verse 3, now the man Moses was very meek, more than all the people who were on the face of the earth. Prior to his time in the desert, he is described as being very arrogant. So through his 40 years, which again is another lifetime of tending to sheep in the desert, he finally had grown into the leader God needed to guide his people out of Egypt. He had been developed in the waiting to have the stamina and the wisdom and the understanding of who God is and the faithfulness that God had brought him in his 80 years so far to answer the call and not question it. It took him 80 years to get to that point, 80 years to be so humbled by his life and by the experience that he has had in life to fully be the person God needed him to be to do what he did. The waiting most certainly mattered in this context. Moses was still not perfect. So he goes, he gets the people from Egypt. He's leading the Israelites, part of the Red Sea, and they're in the desert. And y'all, guess what happens? Moses had to wander around the desert, leading an entire population of people for another 40 years, guys. 40 years. So if you're doing math, that makes Moses a young 120. He doesn't even get to the ultimate destination. And this is something that is almost virtually never talked about. When we hear people talk about finding their purpose, living out their dream, experiencing all that God has for them, there's always this point that you finally reach a point. You reach a point that, man, everything has clicked into place. You're fully operating in God's power. And not to say you don't operate in God's power, but there seems to be this notion that we're all going to get to some end where we finally feel content in who we are in Christ. And guys, I'm here to spoil the story that is not happening until we get to heaven. So I don't know about you, but I can't wait to get to heaven, but I also feel like my work's not done here. So thinking that there's going to be some perfect moment in time where my life is going to be perfect is hogwash when I'm using timing as an excuse to not step up and do things, to not answer the calling that God has in front of me right now. And that's what I want to share with you guys, because Moses literally spends 120 years and doesn't even get the ultimate fulfillment of walking into the promised land. He never even gets to experience the destination. He knew what his job was. He knew that he was to lead God's people, his people too, his bloodline, whatever you want to call it. He knew that the destination was the promised land. He knew that he was fulfilling a promise God had made to get the Israelites to their promised land where they can set roots down and prosper and grow as a nation. He knew that was the destination. And guess what? He didn't get to get it. He didn't get the full fulfillment of walking into the promised land. He sinned against God during the 40 years of being in the desert. He disobeyed God when God told him how to strike the rock to give the people water and food. He didn't listen. He got frustrated. And so God took that away from him. But there was mercy in the story because God did allow Moses to see it. He's got to see a glimpse. And it brings me to tears to think about, because so many of us are desiring to have this end point and to have this level of success, to have this certain lifestyle, to have a list of things. And we expect it. We expect it because we've been fed this lie that like God just gives us what we want. And God gives us what we need. He is growing us in Him. Like that is the ultimate purpose. That is why we are here. And so I am thinking about Moses having lived and toiled and, experienced all of this just huge stuff. I mean, could you imagine the ocean parting in front of you and you're leading the way for all these people to their promised land, to their freedom? Could you imagine that? And experiencing all of these huge moments and being a person who gets to hear directly from the Lord. How many of us would want that? How many of us would love to say a prayer and then God just like audibly talk right back to us and say, well, this is what I need you to do tomorrow. Like we would all love that type of direction, right? So Moses lived through all of that. And in the end, didn't get to experience. He got to see it. And he got to see that the promise has come true. And here they are, and they're going to walk in there, but I don't get to experience it. I've lived this long and I don't get to experience it. So I would say that the journey is all that matters and is in fact the entire point to our lives is our journey. People say, when you look at a gravestone, they have the birth date and the date the person passed. But what matters is that dash. What matters is the dash. And it's true. It's true. It's the purpose of waking up with faith every day to keep going, to keep pursuing, to keep showing others God's love that makes the difference in our life. Purpose isn't about the bolt of lightning moment or the 100% clarity of what step to take. It's about faith. What do you think Moses was thinking all of that time that he was waiting? Your faith in Him, your faith in God, to choose Him daily and to take action on what is in front of you based on what you know and believe at the time. That's it. That's the point. Are you in the desert? Are you wandering, dreaming, aching for a result because your passion burns deep? Good. Because you're exactly where you are supposed to be. We don't have the final answer, and you may never get there. But it's the process of pursuing it where God is working in your life. If you don't take any steps, you most certainly will get nowhere. And to wait for the answer is a vain expectation that will cause you so much time and time that you can never get back. And if you're in a place like I've been before, where you're kind of building resentment in your heart because you haven't acquired, the success you believe that matters, or the level of security that you've been wanting, or haven't got to experience the things that you feel like you're supposed to be doing, then it's time to pray. It's time to bow your head. It's time to pray over that hurt in your heart because God cares. God cares. And He's listening to you. But you are required on the other end of that prayer to listen with open ears and open hands. You may not achieve the level of success that you want. You may never get the right answer. You may never get the burning bush that literally is telling you what to do because God is waiting for you to take that step. God is waiting for you to draw to Him for answers, not to wring your hands and wonder why you're in this situation. He wants you to know that He's with you in this situation, and He wants you to turn to Him so that He can grow you and cultivate you. There is a purpose in the waiting, and your idea of success and what you deem successful may not be what God deems successful for your life. And the only answer you may get is keep going, keep waiting, keep wandering, because the truth you need to know is being cultivated by the journey it is taking you to get there. Are you there? Are you in this space? Have you ever felt any of this at all? Combating the need for knowing the end or only focusing on the when is to be present in the now, because now is truly all that you got. The way to wrestle with this and come out on top is to truly step into the roles that are placed on you right now. How can you learn and be sanctified when you can't steward what is in front of you? And this question came to me so clearly one day, driving in the car after dropping off the kids, wringing my hands, asking God, why do I still feel like this? Why do I still feel like I'm not living out my purpose for you? Why do I still feel like I'm not at the level that I need to be to serve you the most, to do what I feel like I was meant to do? Why am I not getting to do what I feel like I was meant to do? And God said, wait. He said, wait. And he also said, what do you have now? And that turned into the question I asked myself, well, I have to steward well what I have in front of me right now. Because that's what he needs me to do. I can't ever get to the next point if I haven't mastered where I'm at now, if I haven't shown up in my life now. The best we can do is be where we're at and do the best right now, not when, not under this certain set of circumstances we feel it has to be available to us to get to experience that, to have that. So many people are waiting for when they have the right job, when they have the husband, when they have the kids, when they have the most perfect house, when they have more time. When God directly tells me, so many people use the excuse, well, I'm just waiting on God. No, God doesn't need you to wait on him. He needs you to have faith and start taking action. Whether you're in the waiting or not in the waiting, the point is you're supposed to be living. You're not waiting for when, but you might be in a season that is the desert, like Moses, because it is sanctifying you. It is making you become the person you need to be to withhold and withstand and be emboldened in the way that he needs you to be when that time does come for you to walk through the ocean. Okay? And that's what I want to encourage you today, because I needed to hear this. Right now is when you're supposed to be taking action. Right now. Right now is when you're supposed to have faith and draw close to God and hear from him and wake up every day with a fire inside of you to serve him and in the way that you are, because you're not forgotten. You are not forsaken. He knows what you're doing right now. He knows where you're at. He knows what your circumstances are, and he wants to know you in all of it. And how can you expect anything to be different if you are not growing in his likeness? You will forever be in this state of turmoil and questioning and stuck because you're not focusing on the place that God has you. You're not stepping into what he needs you to do so that you can learn and become what is needed of you for that future time. Moses had 80 years to get himself to a place where God knew he could carry out his calling. It took 80 years to prepare him in the way that was going to bring forth a leader that could handle the mission that was placed in front of him. And then he carried out that mission for another 40 years. So how will you ever move further toward that goal, that dream, that calling, that purpose that you feel like you have if you're not readying yourself right now? I can answer for you. You can't. You cannot move forward if you're not readying yourself right now. So this isn't to patronize you or condemn you, but truly it's to just give you this truth that I've been grappling with in this break that I've had during this time, to really just dive into the word and study and research and pray and be right where I am and how I needed to be for my husband, for my kids. You have to ask God, not why not, but what now? What now? What now, God, do you need me to do? What now, God, do I need to see in front of me to act on, to step out in faith, to pray over, to do what I need to do? For some of us, it's going to mean adding things to our plate. For some of us, that's going to be staying still right where you're at. For others of us, it's going to be letting go of some things that you've been white knuckling because you don't know how to let go of something. You don't know what it would mean to let go of that. And when I realized this truth that there is always a season for everything and God is present in it all, I actually felt lighter when I studied Moses' life. Some of us are living up to these expectations and these timelines that society places on us that I spoke of earlier. And we are holding to that and feeling like we're less than, or that we have not anything to offer because we don't have what this person has, or we don't get to have the resources that person has. So how can I possibly make a difference? Or, feeling so overwhelmed with what we have right now that the possibility of doing anything else is just unconscionable. Like there's no way that's happening, right? It seems absolutely impossible. And so when I looked at Moses' life, it's like, no, like I feel good now. Like I actually feel lighter, and I can stay in this season that I feel like I'm in, like this waiting season, because I know there's a purpose in it. So, in being in the season of like, what's next? Why is this taking so long? What's the next chapter? Is this chapter ever going to end? We can look and be like, wow, no, I'm right where I am because I need to be right here. I'm here because I'm supposed to be. And you are where you are because that's where you are supposed to be. It's exciting to think that even in the desert of not seeing much harvest or hearing from God clearly, that there is a kingdom purpose in it. And it's weaving the most beautiful tapestry together that we actually may never even get to behold. But the purpose is we're in the journey. We're in the journey with Him. We're in this journey of life with Him. And you have a mighty purpose on your life because you're here. And that's what you need to know today. So how are you going to respond to this? How is your response going to be to this? And maybe it's taking a second to grab a journal and journal it out, or type it in your phone. Ask yourself this question: what is in front of me right now? Because so many of us are just looking for the win that we cannot see what is in front of us. And if we saw what was in front of us, we could be living out this desire, these callings that we have in our heart. We could be living them out right now because we could be pursuing those things in the roles that He has in front of us. Moses went from an arrogant, entitled, self-righteous person to what is described as him being basically the most humble man on earth. And I don't know if you've met someone who has a truly humble heart, but aren't they the most happy? Aren't they the most joyfully spirited people? They are the ones you walk away from and go, oh, I wish I could be more like them. They're just such a pleasure to be around. And the reason is because they're content, not in the things that they have. They are content because they have the Spirit of Christ dwelling in them and filling their needs, filling their true desires of their heart. God provides that. The Holy Spirit provides that. Not any title, not any amount of money, not any amount of success or level of career status in your society, in your community. Like none of that can compare to the fullness that God brings. Jesus was a humble man. So I want to be more like Jesus. And so I ask you to ask yourself this question and really give it some thought, because I think it will help you feel happy and joyful about where you're at right now. Because even if it's hard right now, you know there's kingdom purpose in it. And the moment you finally start to turn to God and ask Him for the help, pray for Him over the situation, ask for His guidance, you will be grateful, as crazy as that sounds, for the situation that you're in, because it is growing you. It is growing you to be more like God. It's growing you to have that humbleness in your heart and to be joyful in spirit. Because when you are joyful in spirit and it's dependent on knowing God and Him being in your life, nothing in this world can take that joy from you. And isn't that a lovely place to think about being? So I hope that this episode was a good return. I hope it's giving you something to think about. And this is what we can expect on the Thought Vault. We're going to talk about things and delve into topics that are hard, that are fun, that are helpful, And I would love for you guys, if this episode connected with you, or maybe you feel like someone you love needs to hear it, please share this episode. That is the only way this show gets out, this episode gets out, is by word of mouth and sharing it. And it would mean the world to me for you guys to share it, to leave a review. Leaving a review is like gas for this car of a show, and it can get it into more people's ears if we are interacting with it. And that's just one way you can interact with the show, is to leave a review. Also, you guys, I have a private Facebook group where we continue conversations about these episodes, and more Christian life coaching is taking place in our private Facebook group. You can click the link in the show notes or go to boldpearls.com/insiders to jump into that group. Thank you for tuning in today. And until next time, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Romans 12:2. Go live with bold intention, everyone. Bye for now.